Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so excited to have with us Corrine Van Hook. She's the Communications and Outreach Manager for Bay Localize. Welcome to Green is Good, Corrine.
Thank you so much. I'm glad. Thank you for having me.
Hey, we're happy to have you, and we're happy to talk about Bay Localize. But before we get into that, talk a little bit about your journey yourself, Corrine. How did you get here? Was this a dream of yours? Was this something that happened through just accident or a little bit of opportunity? How did you end up in this great position?
I think you could say the stars kind of aligned. I mean, it really kind of, I guess that's the best way to describe it. I grew up, my dad retired in 1989, so, as a person of color, grew up, limited resources. I was blessed to be able to get a scholarship to go to Cal, in which I studied political science, and I was an ideal scholar, which they work with underrepresented, very exceptional, academically, excellent, youth at Cal because of the Prop 209 drop in minority enrollment. Mm-hmm. So as a part of that, I really got engaged in just youth work, social justice work. Really kind of had my keen eye towards, meeting the needs and really being able to hone and excel as a community and as a person of color. So after I graduated, a long-time goal of mine, and it still is to become an attorney and do this work.
Right.
But I ended up kind of taking a different direction. I went, my first job out of college was the Rockwell Leadership Institute. They work doing leadership development with many organizations internationally and nationally. And it was funny how I landed there because that was kind of also by relationship of, behind the scenes after the fact of the scholarship that I had been working with. I had an organization after that, Greater New Beginnings. They do at-risk male youth services for probation youth to kind of help them get a fresh start. I actually ended up with Bay Localize through Rockwood. Rockwood connects a lot of people because they're basically connecting people in the social justice realm across sectors. And, I came across some of the founders' names, and I was like, I'm loving the equity and resilience work that's going on here, and I was really, really blessed to be able to come on board. And that's kind of basically the short and fast.
That's great.
Of what brought me there. But, I think it happened kind of, organically, and kind of the stars aligned a little bit.
Well, and that's awesome. And I'm on your website right now, Bay Localize, for our listeners out there that want to join along. It's a beautiful website. It's baylocalize.org. Tell us a little bit about Bay Localize. What is really the mission of Bay Localize, and what are you up to over there?
Well, Bay Localize, seeks to catalyze a movement toward a regional, national, and even international, actually, because of our tools and resources that we offer, for a self-reliant economy, one that strengthens all communities to combat social inequity, particularly low-income communities of color, because they tend to face impacts of climate change the worst. And we inspire and support Bay Area residents as well as other residents because, like I said, our tools are scalable and, available nationally and internationally. We want to help residents build equitable and resilient communities. So we confront challenges such as climate instability, which obviously with these heat waves, I don't know if you guys are experiencing them, but we definitely have on the West Coast here recently, rising energy costs, and the recession by boosting our region's capacity to provide for everyone's needs. So we want to be able to do this sustainably, and we want to be able to do it equitably. And we were able to achieve this, through three of our main programs. Is kind of we do our main focused work. Green Your City, which is kind of you can touch it, you can feel it. Really, basically gets in the garden, teaches communities, especially in urban areas, that you can have your own garden. You can know where your food is coming from. You can grow your own food, and here are some tools to do that. We have a local Clean Energy Alliance, and they're one of our largest clean energy organizations working on clean energy issues, and Communities for Resilience Toolkit. And that really gives us our international and national presence because it's been downloaded in 23 countries and over 30 states so far, just since we released the 2.0 version. And again, these resources, they're available for free. We don't ask, for a cost for people to be able to assess what their area is doing and how well it's doing in terms of being able to meet needs of, water, food, transportation, and to be able to kind of make moves as a community and also locally and policy-wise to do something about it.
So your website, you've used your website for what the internet was developed as a democratizing tool to spread the great word and to spread the mission and the information that you've created in the toolkits.
Yeah, we're trying. We're definitely trying.
That's awesome. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned at the top of the word resilience. It's not a word we hear a lot with regards to sustainability. Can you tie them together and explain with regards to Bay Localize what you mean about that, Corrine?
Well, resilience, how we define it in our work is the ability, to cope with stress and adversity. And this type of thing, it exists at the level of the individual,
right?
Of the family, the household, and as a community as a whole. And we found in our work, and kind of how I mentioned before, low-income residents and communities of color especially, they have deep experience dealing with stress and adversity. And in fact, do have a lot to teach about resilience because, once again, with having limited resources and being faced, put at the brunt of climate change impacts, and we're talking about, living in a flood-prone area, not having a reliable electricity system or enough energy, heat waves, for example, because of climate change and not having cooling systems and living in housing that doesn't have, efficient ways of cooling or just kind of sustaining as a whole. And this impacts elderly. This impacts also children because of the air quality, for example. In West Oakland, which is an area where they're stationed by the port, and the greenhouse gas emissions in the air really exacerbate respiratory problems. I actually just moved from Oakland, and ever since still in the Bay Area, but ever since I kind of moved, I'm noticing that both my children, I have two little ones, and they were born with asthma and allergy.
Right.
So constantly on medication, constantly up at night, and since I moved, I've noticed a little bit of a difference.
Interesting.
So really, these communities, because they face it hardest, they have to be resilient in, dealing with how to adapt to the impacts of climate change.
You mentioned earlier that all the great downloads in 23 countries, your toolkits and stuff. Talk a little bit about some of your other great accomplishments at Bay Localize.
Yeah, no, certainly. Well, on September 18th, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors voted 8-3 to approve Clean Power SF. It's basically San Francisco's version of the Community Choice Energy, which is rolling out this spring, and it's offering residents the option of purchasing 100% renewable energy, like I said, which is starting this spring. And Bay Localize, our local Clean Energy Alliance, and allies, of course, spent years, and this was prior to my coming on, shaping and the program and organizing support to really move that forward. Some of our other accomplishments recently is, again, the Communities for Resilience Toolkit, which now has kind of shaped. We were able to do the Bay Area's Joint Policy Commission requested Bay Localize to prepare a regional work plan for community outreach and social equity that would be in the Bay Area climate adaptation planning, because now people are really kind of getting their eyes around climate change, as you've seen, with Obama's speech. And the recommendations were based on an extensive consultation. We worked with, over 30 regional grassroots social justice and other community leaders by beginning with a survey and a workshop. The survey was done in-depth online. It was offered both in English and Spanish for just a little bit more accessibility, and voluntarily distributed by 55 Bay Area community and social service organizations. So, and this was throughout. We have 9 counties in our throughout the Bay Area, and so there were responses by more than 400 residents, and we were able to host a workshop in January of this year with 30 regional social justice, public health, and community engagement experts to be able to shape these proposals. And again, this report and the findings of it is available, again, for download for free online. It's baylocalize.org/mapping-our-future. And what the survey and workshop found, just to kind of give you like a quick snapshot, is that climate impact, about which the greatest number of survey respondents expressed concern, was the rising price of food and other basic goods. They also expressed concern about major storms and the impacts of that, drought, again, like I mentioned, poor air quality, and how crucial it is to partner with organizations in vulnerable communities so that you can get the most effective strategy for local governments so that they're able to engage them in planning. One of the really big things that they believe was really important was that community organizations to be funded for the time and effort their involvement in planning happens because they represent a highly vulnerable community. So, I mean, this can mean job creation and really actual intentional investment in adaptation versus having a disconnect. So you have actually the community groups and the regional agencies working together to come up with a plan that's equitable in terms of climate adaptation.
Corrine, we have about 3 minutes left. Can you tell, why is the interest for this great work that Bay Localize is doing, why does that seem to be growing, both locally and nationally?
Because, the impacts of climate change are real. People are noticing that, the quality of their food is going down, and it's very expensive to even get food because of accessibility, because, crops, the way they grow, all of this is impacted by climate change. Over 5,000 people, annually approximately are, dying of asthma attacks, and this is because of our air quality. We're a fossil fuel dependent economy, and it needs to get better. We need to diversify our clean energy, and it's really starting to affect communities. And I'm glad that people are giving more voice and there's more attention toward it. But we really, really kind of need to ramp up our efforts to provide, basic needs.
We got 2 minutes left. What's your hope for Bay Localize, and where do you think this is going to go the next 5 years?
I really hope that we're just able to kind of continue to be our role of bridging community and helping folks in communities meet their basic needs and prepare themselves, like, with a vengeance. And I say this seriously for climate change and climate change impact, because with what's happened to the Earth and kind of the strain that we've put on it, we've reached, 400 particles per, in terms of what's, the greenhouse gas emissions, and, we are still feeling that. So really to be able to just equip us to be able to sustain impacts like, Sandy, for example, which is heightened by climate change. That's my hope, and for us to be able to grow, as an organization so that we can, be more resourceful for folks just across the region, across the state, and internationally. Because, again, a lot of the things that impact us, even though our needs are different, are basically the same as we address these concerns of climate.
Corrine, in the last minute or so, there's a lot of listeners out there that want to get involved. Can you tell someone, give them some way of entering into this process of volunteering or donating if they're so excited to be involved with what you're doing and your mission?
Yes, definitely. Well, our members are very near and dear to our work. They basically drive our work. Starting at a donation, we do monthly donations. Every little bit helps. We are a small organization, and we definitely work on the ground. So, baylocalize.org, go to our to donate. You can reach it right from our homepage. Like I said, all donations are appreciated. We here locally, which, only benefits, if you're here locally, we have a clean energy and job Oakland campaign, which is basically getting community choice here in Oakland for renewable energy and job creation, so that, all of that's in our hands for the community.
Perfect.
So those are like the best ways to plug in right now.
Well, for our listeners out there that want to learn more or get involved, it's www.baylocalize.org. Corrine Van Hook, you are a wonderful sustainability evangelist and truly living proof that green is good.